What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and I'm joined by my good friend LBHackemup. I'll have links in the description to all of her stuff. If you want to go check it out, follow her. She does Twitch and YouTube and all that good stuff. And we're going to do the Unearthed Arcana Folk of the Feywild survey for you here. A lot of people have been asking about it, and we just took some time and re-reviewed the Unearthed Arcana. So before we dive into the actual survey itself, what did you think out of those 4 races?
I liked all of them.
Okay.
The Hobgoblin was like a little okay. This is kind of, we already have that.
Yeah, sure.
I liked the helping actions and all that. That makes it a little bit more interesting. But I think I like the owl folk the best.
What is it? The detect magic thing? Or...
I liked that, but I also liked the ability to like catch yourself
when you're
falling.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird that no other flying races have that, and I don't know if owls are particularly known for that in the wild.
Graceful.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're graceful, sure, and quiet.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
You know, I mean, like falcons, can dive at ridiculous speeds and then pull out of it.
Yeah.
So it feels like they should, but
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's just and we know they're not going to go back and update the other races because they never do that.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, let's jump over to whoa, that's not it. Let's try doing a little swapping. There we go. Oh boy, what happened?
You moved it over here.
I did. There we go. Good, it's fine. Everything's fine. So here we are on the D&D website. So we'll go ahead and click the survey link here, and it'll take us over there. And again, I say this all the time, but make sure you fill out the surveys because they only know if you like this or if they should continue to do this if it's voted well or not well. Yeah. So would you like to rate it? If you say no, the survey ends, just so you're aware.
It's not very helpful.
Yes. What was the first edition of D&D you played? Mine's 3rd. Is yours 3rd as well?
3.5.
So yeah, I mean, they're pretty much the same.
Yeah.
I'd say in a lot of respects. All right. Before reading this, were you interested in playing any of these characters in 5th edition? So I wouldn't have said rabbit folk or owl folk because I would have assumed that Aarakocra covered owls.
Yeah.
And a hobgoblin already exists, and I've never wanted to play one,
no,
so I'm going to say no.
A fairy.
A fairy is. I'm going to say personally filling it out. I'm going to say I had not considered it.
Yeah.
Because I just assumed like they weren't going to make a race with flight and magic. Yeah. And I'm gonna say I'm gonna say no to these two because I didn't even know rabbit folk was an option.
Yeah, I play Humblewood. So
okay.
Like having those little animal folk, I just love them. Oh.
So how important is your choice of race during character creation to you? Very unimportant, slightly unimportant, important, very important, or don't know, not sure. So for you, what is it? Is your race critical to the design of your character?
Yes.
It is? Okay.
But probably not for the same reason it is for you. Because I like playing different creatures and different races because I want to play everything.
Okay.
And I want to try different styles of play and personalities and that sort of thing. It's not more of a mechanic thing for me.
So I can say that with the advent of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, allowing you to swap around your ability scores, for me, prior to that, my race choice was pretty much whatever was the most optimal for the character that I was playing, right? So if I was going to play a wizard, let's say, I'd want to have a race that gave me a bonus to intelligence.
Yeah. Unless
I happen to roll out of the park and get 18s across the board, then maybe, then it doesn't matter. I'll just pick whatever I want. And that was actually something that I'd had discussions on a long time ago. If you had 6 18s, what would you play? Yeah. And the answer was, well, I could pick any race I want because I'm not limited. But with Tasha's Cauldron allowing me to swap stuff around, I can just decide, okay, well, like we just talked about it earlier, I would normally in the past never have played a Tiefling Barbarian. Right. Because you're going to need Strength, Dex, and Con, and you'd be starting with a +2 Charisma. Now, I know and I understand that a lot of people out there will say, well, that's not important. You don't have to do that. Pick whatever you want. But for me, and for me to enjoy playing what I want to be the most optimal version of whatever I'm playing to enjoy it the most. That's how I get my enjoyment out of it, so it's different for everybody else.
Yeah. I play a Halfling Barbarian, so I don't share that. So.
Fair. But now I can... the advent of that has unlocked a variety of things for me. And you could say, oh, you just use the custom lineage and make up a race, but... the cool mechanics like we see in this and as what we've seen in the existing races are like some of them are really unique and interesting.
Yeah.
So I would be able to now play things that I wouldn't normally play, and I could also play things for jokes and for like the memes, like oh, you know, maybe I'll be like a gnome barbarian, but I would be, you know, as or halfling barbarian and be as good as I could be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or play like a Goliath wizard.
Yes.
And I'm like a big, huge, bulky guy, but I'm super hyper intelligent.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Things like that. So I'm gonna say for me that it's important. But it's not. You know, I'm gonna say it's slightly important. How about that? That's probably more accurate.
Keep it very middle.
Yeah. Have I play tested these rules? No, I haven't. I haven't had a chance to. But how were you satisfied with the different rules here? So creating your character overall. That's this upper piece where they talk about how they're handling the races going forward. So what we saw with the Gothic lineages was they're basically like pick stats.
Yeah.
They changed it actually for this. So normally it was in a custom lineage was like +2 or maybe it was +1 to 2 or +2 plus 1. Yeah. This is now saying it's +2 to 1, +1 to another, or +1 to 3.
Okay.
So I enjoy that, giving you a little variability, right? You know, depending on how you roll. If you're rolling or point by, +1 to 3 could be more beneficial to you than +1 and +2. Yeah. And then the only other thing they kind of give you here is languages. Basically, you get common and a language of your choice. And then you can work with your DM to figure that out. And then they just give you a little bit of the background on creature type to further describe, like the fairy in here is Fey. Yeah. And they described how things like hold person won't work on a Fey creature. Right. Things like that. So I'm going to say I'm very satisfied with that section, as I am with all of those. Yeah. And I'm going to put in my comments here. I like the addition of +1 to 3 ability scores.
Yeah. I've always been of the mindset as a DM that languages, tell me where you're from and why you would have that language, and I'll usually let you have it. So I like that they're being a little bit more lenient on that. Yeah, and I think I don't know if it says it there, but they have something, I think, add or remove languages, but you could always decide that maybe your character doesn't have common. Yeah. Right? Maybe it has 2 other languages. Have I play tested the fairy? No. Am I satisfied with the fairy? Yeah, I'd say I'm satisfied with the fairy overall. I'd say I'm very satisfied with the fairy's flight mechanic. It's a 30-foot fly speed, but it's interesting that even if you have like Tinkerbell or insect wings, it's not required. You don't have to flap them, Or you could just not have wings and just like fly around like Magneto, just like float. Yeah. Superman style. Fairy magic, I think I was fine with, right? It was Druidcraft and Fairy Fire. Those fit. That makes sense. And they put in the language that if you have spell slots, you could use your spell slots to cast them. Yes. And at higher levels, if you look. Correct. Yeah, which is nice because, you know, like we saw with Magic Initiate and a lot of the old things, like even if your Tiefling had Hellish Rebuke, you could only cast it once and not use your. And again, another thing that bothers me, why not go back and make that symbol? If you're going to make everything going forward have this variability, why don't you go back and adjust? I would recommend that you as DMs allow people to do that. Yes. To fit in with the new stuff. I'm satisfied with Fairy Magic. And Fey Passage, the fact that I made a video on squeezing in D&D yesterday, I think I'm very happy about this, that it lets you squeeze through a 1-inch space. Do any other races have that, like the Rat Folk or anything? No, well, Rat Folk aren't 5th edition official anyway. But I brought this up in the squeezing video. In old editions, go watch it. Yeah, they had things like fine build or slight build, or something like that, which was basically allow you to squeeze into a smaller space, but with no side effects. Yeah. So I think if I were going to, and I don't think I did it in my version of fixing the kobold, but I would go back and change that. I think a kobold more than, say, like a halfling. Yeah. They're both small size, but you're trying to fit into a smaller space. I'd say in my head it works better that a kobold could squeeze through a tiny size space with no detriments rather than like a halfling or a gnome. Yeah. So I think slight build in that sense should make a comeback in certain races. Obviously, it doesn't need to be as drastic as 1 inch wide. Yeah. Like a fairy. Yeah. But and I don't really have anything else I want to comment on the fairy. I think I'm pretty good with that. No, have I tested Hobgoblin or the Feywild? I don't know.
I'm not sure on the Feywild, the Hobgoblin of the Feywild overall. Dark Vision, fine.
Yeah.
It's satisfied. It's the standard stuff. Fey Ancestry also exists. Now, Fey Gift was the weird one. That's this. So you can give the help action as a bonus action, proficiency times per long rest. Okay, that's fine, I guess. But then they add this weird thing at 3rd level where they specifically state whether you take the help action as a bonus action or an action, you can do 3 other things, right? You can give people temporary hit points, walking speed increase, or the creature you hit, if you damage a creature, they have disadvantage on the next attack roll they make. And we already talked about it, and the internet just talked about it a bunch too. If you're a Hobgoblin Mastermind Rogue, you can just bonus action help all the time.
Yeah. And
I don't know, it's a mechanic that we haven't seen.
Yeah.
And I've said this before, and I'm still lukewarm on this, but I also like it a lot in theory. Is taking a race or a class that takes an established mechanic that exists and tweaks it.
Yeah.
Because help action exists, everybody knows what it is.
Yeah.
But this is like you're tapping into the ability to use it differently.
Yeah.
And I think my reservations, and I don't know about the internet, and I don't know about yours, but I think the reservations are because it's new.
Yeah.
We haven't seen something like this.
Yeah.
So, but if this does well, then it opens up the opportunity for things like this to happen more in the future.
Yeah. I'm not against like using things like help or like even disengage. You could have disengage, but you like stab on the way out or something like.
Yeah, disengage with an attack or a dash with attack, opportunities or attack opportunities are made at disadvantage or things like that.
I think it gives it a little bit more flavor because I don't know that many people that use the help action. Like in our campaign together, I was a mastermind and I barely used it because I was a rogue. I was doing other things.
Yeah, like, sure. Yeah. To the point where you changed because you didn't use it at all. Did not tell the rest of the party. It just happened, and I was like, I picked up on it, but
guys barely noticed.
I knew from the second you're like, do I have this? And I was like, something's different. And then lastly, Fortune from the Many is interesting because that is basically just a reskinning of the existing Hobgoblin ability called Saving Face, I think it's called. And I'm actually going to go pull it up on D&D Beyond because I thought that was a short rest recharge for the Hobgoblin. Let's see. Where is it? Saving Face. Yeah, if you miss with an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, bonus equal to the number of allies within 30 feet, maximum of 5. But it comes back on a short or long rest. So they kept that. They just made it a long rest. And like they changed it to be something about your bonds of reciprocity versus your fear of losing status.
Yeah.
So like if you're going to make a whole new version of a Hobgoblin, do you really need to stick with that? I mean, I guess they didn't give them, like, the armor proficiencies and things they had. It felt weird to me.
I mean, I think it's interesting because it makes you want to play your character more close to your companions. Or to make more friends because...
Sure, more allies to help you out there. My only slight reservation, I guess, is Fey Gift and Fortune of the Many too much? I guess maybe not, because some races get spells, so I don't know. Yeah. All right, so I guess overall I'm satisfied with both of them. Actually, I'm only slightly satisfied with Fortune of the Many. And I'm just gonna make the comment. Why though?
What? Helpful, super helpful, Ted.
Listen, all right. So have not playtested the Owl Folk. I'm very satisfied with it overall. Yeah. I'm very satisfied with the 90 feet of dark vision. Yes. That's the first time we've seen that. We've seen 120, but it's usually coupled with sunlight sensitivity.
Exactly.
And standard 60, so a little something different to make it 90. Magic Sight was detect magic all the time, though, as a ritual only.
Yeah, so I'd say 11 minutes it takes you to figure something out.
And I'm okay with that, right? Me too. Because more often than not, in almost any campaign where you have someone with detect magic, it's almost always cast as a ritual anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they can cast it, it's always as a ritual, unless it's like a warlock where you can just do it immediately. Yeah. Most people aren't going to prep detect magic with the purposes of using an action to cast it.
Exactly.
Unless it's like, we need to know right now.
Yeah. Is it gonna blow up? Is it gonna blow up?
Yeah, right, exactly. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I think that would be, I'd also be okay with more ritual things showing up. So detect magic is pretty tame.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I wouldn't be opposed to something like where you can cast Find Familiar as a racial thing, but only as a ritual, which would be like an hour.
Yeah.
And 10 minutes. Yeah. But another one I think could be fun would be like Alarm.
Yeah.
Like a race that gives you Alarm as a ritual. So like you can, set up your little thing. I don't know what it would be.
Yeah, I was gonna say
maybe a robot.
Yeah, ooh, a robot.
Some sort of droid type creature.
Type.
Yeah. And then Nimble Flight is, this is also something I noticed that was different. They kind of did something similar for the Aarakocra, but a lot of other races that have like a swim speed or something like that, under the speed section, it says, your walking speed, and you have a walking speed of 30 feet and a swim speed of 30 feet, or a climb speed. But for both the fairy and the owl folk, they are a separate section.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if it's because it has other things. So like the fairy is flight, but also doesn't use magic. And the nimble flight here has what we talked about at the start. When you fall, you can use your reaction to make a dex save with only a DC of 10 to stop falling in place until the start. Stop falling and fly in place until the start of your next turn.
Yeah.
But it does specifically state that you have to use your reaction. So if you're knocked unconscious, you're still plummeting to the ground.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting middle ground, because a lot of the races that had wings in 3.5, if you fell, your wings would lock.
Oh.
And you would sort of like duck hunt, spiral down and take no damage.
Yeah.
So they had that as built into a lot of them, that like your natural body defenses is if you went unconscious, your wings would go rigid to sail you down.
That's clever.
And this is like the closest thing we've seen to that. So this might be the new middle ground that we get. And once again, as a DM, me to you, I would say if this is going to be the standard, then you retroactively apply this to any winged races that you have, whether they be Aarakocra, winged tiefling, or some other homebrew. I don't see why an owl folk could do this better than anything else.
I wonder if they just put it in because they thought of it now.
Well, that's and this is a problem I had when I spoke to some of the D&D devs a couple years ago. They said they didn't want to, and I really appreciate the part of the mentality, which was they will not let things they made and created in the past hamper them from making new and improved decisions in the future. And I said that's a really clever and well thought out mindset, right? Just because we designed paladins this way in 2015 doesn't mean we need to follow that same formula and how we design them in 2021. Here's the thing, though. If it's a mechanical change like this, just go back and change it. You can make errata for free in a PDF on the internet. I know you typically wait until you're publishing a new set of books so that it comes out in the printed version. You have things like D&D Beyond where you can update it immediately. You did things like the Elemental Evil Player's Companion, which was an entire free PDF that is where the only place Aarakocra live in this PDF, along with Genasi, and then, printed in the back of Princess of the Apocalypse. That was a free PDF that everybody could get. The Turtle package, right? That was, Lakatha Rising, One Grung Above. These were all PDFs. I know they have the thing about PDFs. They don't like PDFs because they can be shared.
Yes. But also, I mean, I can kind of understand because, like, they want it to be accessible, like, and a lot of people read the books and they want it to be in the books and they can't go back and, like, reprint the other book. Well, they could, but, it's going to a lot of money. I'm not saying it's right.
Okay.
I'm saying that's probably the mindset that
No, I think you're right. Well, that's why they usually wait to update an errata until the next printing of a book, right? So if we're on printing Player's Handbook printing 15, when printing 16 comes out, maybe we'll get lucky and they'll change it so that all of the races that cast spells can cast them with their spell slots. So I'm very satisfied with that. And then Silent Feathers, I'm just satisfied with it. It's just the proficiency in stealth. And then I'm going to say in the comments, I love the additions to Nimble Flight. Please go back and add this to all other flying races.
Yep.
Okay.
Are there any races that have wings that aren't Aarakocra? Like bird? Are there any demon-like?
There is a variant in the Sword Coast Adventures Guide of winged tiefling.
Yeah.
You trade away all of your spell casting for wings.
Oh, cool.
So you still have the fire resistance, but you'd lose your cantrip and your 2 spells to have wings. And funnily enough, they went back and changed that to then say, because originally it was just you had wings.
Yeah.
And that was great. But then they went back in one of the recent editions and said, but you can only fly if you're wearing light or medium armor.
Oh yeah.
Well, prior to that, you could. Sense. Prior to that, and we actually played a whole campaign using where we had a tiefling paladin who wore plate mail and could fly, and there was no issues with that until they decided 4 years later to change it to make it, medium or light armor only. Have I play tested the rabbit folk? No. Yeah. Am I satisfied with the rabbit folk overall? Yeah, actually, quite a bit.
They're very cool.
Hair Trigger. Also, the names for those are great. Hair Trigger is the initiative. Proficiency to initiative, very satisfied. Leoprene senses is just perception. I'm only satisfied. It's fine. We see that a bunch.
Yeah.
Lucky footwork. I'm slightly satisfied. This is the one that you weren't too sure about with the D4 to the dexterity saving throws. I don't know. I mean, it stacks with bless.
Right.
So if I cast bless on you and you fail a dexterity saving throw, you get the D4 from my bless and the D4 from that. So in that specific instance, that could be up to a swing of 8, which could more often than not, I would hope.
Yeah.
Unless you're like real bad.
True. I don't know. I just feel like when something's like you get a plus D4 to something, it's like, all right, cool. That's like nothing. It could be nothing, or it could make all the difference. But it just doesn't feel like it's that big of a deal. I'm not mad that they have it in there.
Sure. I think D4s, I think maybe it's just because of the presence of guidance so frequently.
Yeah.
To me, adding a D4 to an ability check makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
But to a saving throw, I mean, maybe, I guess we've all been in that situation where you're like, so close, you just made it or you just missed.
Yeah.
And it'd be like, damn, if I only had a +1.
Yeah.
Well, this would be that instance where you have the +1. Well, it was supposed to represent its lucky footwork, right? So we're talking about literally rabbit's feet, and we're trying to replicate the luck of that. So I don't know how else you would do that. That's a simple way without making it OP, like having a lucky, like re-rolling one. I guess you could maybe try to tap into the halfling luck feature and say, like, if you roll a natural 1 on a dexterity saving throw, you could then re-roll it. And that's still keeping it, unless the whole thing is to keep the re-rolling of ones specifically halfling.
Yes, yeah.
But this would be so limited to only dexterity saving throws. Yeah. I don't know. Do you think that steps on the halfling's toes too much if you did that, or you think that would be okay?
No, because my luck as a halfling comes up so little.
Really?
Yeah, like I usually, if I'm going to roll low, it's like a 4 or a 2 or something like that. I rarely roll a 1.
Well, you're a barbarian too, so I guess if you're attacking, it's probably reckless. You already have advantage.
Yeah, but no, I don't think so. I don't see it as like it would be too much. But honestly, like this, it's fine. I don't think that, I think it's something that I would forget about, honestly.
Really? Okay.
Because it's like, it's just a D4. But that's my mindset, and that's not necessarily reflective of everyone.
No. And then lastly is Rabbit Hop, and I'm only satisfied with this one because, and people brought this up, so I'll acknowledge it here. So it's once on each of your turns when you walk at least 5 feet, you can hop. Roll a d12, and you add that many feet to in the direction of your choice. You add that 1 to 12 feet. The extra distance costs no movement, but you can only hop if your speed isn't 0. I think part of the reason they added that too is if you're grappled.
Yeah.
Or you are restrained in some way, you can't hop anyway.
Yeah.
But I brought up, I was like, well, that's dumb because I'm immediately thinking tactically on a battle map.
Yeah.
You know, your grids are 5 foot
exactly.
blocks. So really, it's just like, well, maybe you should have changed that. But then people in the chat brought it up that playing with a grid is technically an optional rule.
Yeah.
And using if you're playing with minis and stuff, I feel like everybody's using a 5 foot grid. It's pretty standard. Yeah. But people said, you could still in theory have like a table with no grid lines on it, and then you could move 1 to 12 feet, and snapping to the grid is technically a variant rule. But who are you?
Yeah.
Who are you people who are doing this? Because that was a joke, but I'm also genuinely curious. How do you track that your movement speed, it's just like how difficult terrain says for each foot of movement, you use 1 additional foot.
Yeah.
So for most of us, that's like, well, it's half movement.
Yeah,
because I'm using 1 extra foot.
Yeah, yeah.
But like, who is there going like, well, okay, 2 feet.
Yeah.
4 feet.
Yeah.
6 feet. Like,
well, I mean, could be used in like theater of the mind too, because if you want to keep track that way, I don't.
But I mean, but again, like everything else though is like everything else combat wise is like attacks made within 5 feet have advantage or disadvantage. You know, oh, if you attack someone with a ranged weapon within 5 feet, it has disadvantage. Well, I'm 6 feet away.
Yeah.
And then it's like, are you going to start splitting the hairs on singular foot? How about 5 foot 1 inch away? You know what I mean? Like that's not within 5 feet. That's a singular.
You're gonna have players that do that too.
Well, 100%. But so I don't know how you would fix that,
right?
Because like it's a D12. So obviously you want to roll high. So you say, oh, I hop 12 feet.
Yeah.
Well, then you could be like, well, should I just make it a D10?
Yeah.
And it's 1 to 10 feet.
Yeah.
And then, well, what happens if I roll an 11 on this D12? Then does it just snap back to a 10?
Yeah.
And then at that point, shouldn't I just flip a coin and whether it's 5 or 10 feet?
Yeah, see, I'm thinking like, what if you did it a D4 and each one was 5 feet?
Right. Oh, so you're saying like
you go up to 20 feet.
Up to 20 feet. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I guess you could also, again, just do
if you want to roll it.
You could just do a coin flip.
Yeah.
Heads is 5 feet, tails is 10 feet.
I mean, you could just say...
It's just a weird mechanic.
Yeah, you could move up to this amount. You could even do that too.
Yeah, I
if you don't want to worry about the rolling. This
reminds me of like the fact that certain things, I think it's one of the new barbarians uses a D3.
Oh.
You know
I have one of those.
Yeah, so do I. But like a lot of people, in my mind, and I kind of think rightfully so, like I'm no stranger to weird dice, right? D30s are one of my favorite dice. But a D3? Yeah. Like, especially if you're trying to market 5e as something to, like, new players, they're going to be like, wait, what's a D3?
Yeah.
I have a D4.
Yeah.
Why couldn't you have just made it a D4?
That's what I see. My first thought was, like, make it up to 15 feet, roll a D6, and then 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. It was not like D3. Yeah, roll a D3.
Yeah, that's my point. Yeah, so... Actually, the more we talk about this, I'm slightly dissatisfied with Wrap It Up. The D12 though. For why?
For why? Maybe you should go into a little bit more detail.
Yeah, I guess maybe I should.
So we're not being a check.
Let's say so. Most people play on grids with 5 foot increments. How do you reasonably expect people who roll a 1 to 4, 6 to 9, or 1 to 4, 6 to 9, or 11 to 12 capture that?
And again, like, yes, there's a varying rule that you don't have to use a battle grid, but most people do. There's a lot of rules like that. Like you said, you could, your race, you could choose whatever sort of additions you want for it, but most people don't. I mean, I know a lot of people don't do that. So like.
All right, and then the last one here is, how interested are you in playing these options in the future? Hobgoblin, very uninterested. Let's start there.
Yeah.
What about you? If you had to go down, so fairy, are you? Where do you land on the spectrum of playing a fairy?
I would say interested. I'm honestly probably interested in playing all of them, but the Hobgoblin only because I think it's more mechanics than I want to like sit down with the help actions. Again, I played the Mastermind Rogue, and I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna do that. I think I'd be the most interested again in playing the Owl Folk, just as a personal thing. The Rabbit Folk I'm very interested in too, because the concept of the being quick on your feet and I mean the extra movement, I would change that personally. But yeah.
So for me, I'm gonna say I'm interested in the fairy. I'm not gonna say I'm slightly interested in it, honestly. It's okay. The flying is cool. The squeezing is probably my favorite part of the whole thing. No one's going to say no to a once a long rest fairy fire,
Yeah.
or again with spell slots, which is nice. So that is something that I think is interesting in capturing this is you could play a race that, or a class rather, that doesn't have access to fairy fire in any way.
Yeah.
Like I say, a paladin.
Yeah.
You pay a fairy paladin, and now you have access to fairy fire. You can use your spell slots to cast it with, which is pretty cool. The owl folk I'm interested in. I think that's pretty cool. I think an owl folk cleric just makes sense in my head. And then the rabbit folk, honestly, just for the rabbit folk rogue, because of the implications of the way the abilities could work really well. A lot of people have expressed interest in playing a fighter and living their Usagi Yojimbo fantasies of playing a rabbit folk samurai, which kudos to you for doing that as well. And then I think that's pretty much what hit next. It is just going to give us the anything else. I'm going to say glad to see new and unique race options. Hopefully this paves the way for more races in the future.
Yes.
Where is the dog race?
Give us the dog race, you cowards.
Submit.
I want to play a pug.
Yeah. So that is it for the folk of the Feywild. This does seem to lend itself a little bit more to the fact that one of the books that I predicted was hoping going to come out this year was going to be a Feywild adventure book. Because we had seen the update to the Neverwinter MMO that they were returning to the Feywild for that. This kind of leads me to think that, but we know they said they were going to do 3 classic campaign settings this year alone. We know Ravenloft is one. We know that's coming in 2 months. We're all pretty certain Dragonlance is going to be another one because of the dragon things. What the third one is, I have no concept, but the Feywild is in a classic campaign setting. So this might just be like an adventure. But they haven't really done this where, other than Princes of the Apocalypse, where they give you a campaign and then tack races into the back of it.
Yeah.
So for all we know, this could be something that's coming out in 2022. I hope not.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I'd say the most interesting thing is a lot of people had said when they saw the Gothic lineages, they lost their mind. Because they were saying, you told us that the concept of lineages, custom lineage and everything, Tasha's culture and everything was purely optional.
Yeah.
And then you immediately released 3 lineages and they're like, well, clearly it's not optional. This is your plan for races going forward. We're changing from races to lineages. And then I said, well, they seem more like templates that you'd apply on any race, or you could even acquire them, right?
Yeah.
Like if you die and come back. But then they immediately released the next Unearthed Arcana 4 races. They still have the variability of Tasha's Cauldron, and everything's changing ability scores. And I think this is where we're going to land.
Yeah.
Who knows? We'll see. I'm sure people will comment. But I think that's what we're going to get. We're going to get races as races with customizable ability scores. And then lineages are kind of templates. Right? Like you might have... I don't know. I can't actually think like I was gonna say lycanthrope, but I guess shifters are supposed to cover that. But you have your vampire.
Yeah.
You have your sort of hag-born thing, and like your person who died and came back.
Yeah.
I don't really have a good idea for other like lineages that you could add. Do you have any thoughts on like a thing you could gain or apply to yourself as you have like, you could start with it as your race, or like something you might acquire through play?
Isn't Fey Touch a thing?
I guess you could. Well, I mean, they have like their hag or whatever it is, hex blood or whatever. So you could do something along the lines of like maybe like I guess one could be an interesting one would be like a saint, and so like a holy person. Maybe you are called, or you do whatever deeds you were to become a saint, and then you could have that applied to you. Or something maybe opposite on the other side, profane style, where you do something and you're kind of like a chosen of a you could do it with like deities and being chosen. That could be an interesting one.
A place a fake creature like blesses you, or like I don't know. You could even do it with like different creatures too, like a giant dragon turtle is like, I like you. You get a hardened shell. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and then
you
that's
can do
your new thing. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not really sure where they're going to go, because we'll see what the final product of these lineages is in Van Richten's when it comes out, and see how much has changed. But I do think that this is kind of going to be the balance we have. Like template-style lineages that you can choose, and then races, but with fully customizable ability scores. Oh, and I'll bring it up because somebody mentioned in the ability score section in here, it said something about like the quick start guide or the quick build section, and they didn't read it, so I'm going to read it to you. It says the quick build section for your character's class offers suggestions on which scores to increase. Because in the beginning of all the classes, it says, hey, you know, primary, you know, use charisma and then constitution or whatever the case may be. So what it's saying is, if you're going to play one of these new races, like an owl folk cleric, it's going to tell you to prioritize wisdom and then maybe constitution or strength or whatever you might choose. So that's what it's saying. Determine it. I know a lot of people are like, why don't you just give us the ability score types? And I don't care. I mean, pick what you want.
Yeah.
Right? What does it matter? What does it matter that the quintessential owl folk is +2 wisdom, +1 dexterity? Versus, you know, you just doing that. Why do you need to have it typed? I don't know.
It gives you more options, and it makes you more like interested in creating your character. Like because like with the rabbit folk, you could be any type of rabbit.
Or you could be a chunky rabbit with +2 strength, +1 constitution. You're a barbarian rabbit.
Yeah. Or like a mini owl.
Right. A tiny little baby owl with dexterity and high wisdom. Yeah. Exactly. Man, this is probably the longest one of these survey videos I've ever done. That's okay. The back and forth is nice. We'll see. The internet might hate it, but anyway. So, thank you all so much for watching. Candlekeep giveaways, stuff still going on. Links in the description. LB stuff down there as well. Go check her out. And we'll see you probably in another video in the near future.